This week we're beginning a series following the Second Mile Church Covenant as we learn to rely and participate with one another in Christ's body. We're going to be exploring what the covenant is and how we live it out in our day-to-day. So let me begin by describing what a covenant is. Simply put, it's a promise, an enduring agreement which defines a relationship. And the Bible is full of these binding, solemn agreements. You can think of Noah and Moses and Abraham and David, these promises that were made to them through which God has shown his steadfast, faithful, loyal love. And done that by redeeming and protecting his people, and those people then responding in obedience to God's law. But all of these covenants find their fulfillment in Jesus. The Bible speaks and describes Jesus as the last Adam, as true Israel, as David's greater son. And that's because all of these covenants he fulfilled. And on top of that, he begins a new covenant that starts at the cross by his blood. And the Bible speaks to the fact that he mediates this better covenant with better promises, and that all of these promises are yes in him. I love how Ephesians 2 puts it when it says, "We were strangers to the covenants of promise, having no hope and without God in the world. But now in Christ Jesus, you who are far off have been brought near by the blood of Christ." We now live as God's covenant people, his new covenant people, and that means that we live in covenant with each other. The Bible speaks and to a vast array of one another's, describing what this covenant, what it really looks like to live that out. So we resolve to reflect and to live in this way, to be devoted to one another, to love one another, to honor one another above ourselves, to live in harmony with one another, to build up one another, to accept one another and admonish one another, to care for one another, to serve one another, to bear one another's burdens, to forgive one another, to be patient with one another, to submit to one another, and to be kind and compassionate to one another, to speak to one another with psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, to teach one another, to bear with one another, to comfort one another, to exhort one another, to stir one another up to love and good works, to show hospitality to one another, to encourage one another, to pray for one another, to confess faults to one another, to serve one another, to clothe ourselves with humility toward one another. That is a mouthful of one another's. And I pray that we can resolve to live faithfully in this way, to continue to covenant together. May this series on the church covenant encourage you to do just that.